Hi, I'm Dan Edds, and I'm a member of the Reservoir Advisory Council. We're working to build a more sustainable leadership culture. I was walking into a rural community hospital and ran into Christy. When she saw me, she said something like this: Dan, you wouldn't believe what's going on around here. They allowed me to be part of a team to improve hospital safety. So the first thing we did was tour the hospital and all of the clinics and look for ways to improve safety. We found 109 torn and frayed area rugs that needed to be replaced. We just presented our findings to the Board of Supervisors, who gave us the money to buy new rugs. Can you believe it? They really listened to us. Now, replacing torn and frayed area rugs may not sound like much, but patient falls is a major source of hospital injury. If a patient falls because of a frayed rug, there is a high probability that a nurse or an aide will go down with them, meaning one fall and 2 people get hurt. But the real story in Christy's statement is they really listened to us. Now, there's a backstory to this. You see, this hospital is owned and operated by the local community. The community elects its Board of Supervisors, and part of its mission involves developing total community health. Therefore, they identified relationships as a core value to achieve their mission. But they took this value to the next level by identifying active listening as foundational to building relationships. Therefore, every leader had to learn active listening skills to support the internal and external relationships with their patients and their community. The logic was that active listening would improve patient satisfaction and clinical outcomes. Better listening would also strengthen internal working relationships and support their community partners. So when Christy said, they are really listening to us, she was really saying relationships is a core value, and our leaders are modeling this value by actively listening to their employees. Unfortunately, Christy's experience is more the exception rather than the norm. Right now, the level of actively engaged workers tops out at around 1/3 of all U.S. workers. Worldwide, this number drops to around 13%. In his book, Leadership BS, Jeffrey Pfeiffer of Stanford University sums the current condition of the workplace. Quote, regardless of the time and money spent on leadership, the situation in workplaces, not just in the United States, but around the world, is dire, with disengaged, disaffected, and dissatisfied employees everywhere, end of quote. However, in high-impact organizations, 2/3 of their employees are actively engaged, contributing to innovation, delivering extraordinary customer value, and feeling like they have an active voice in creating an extraordinary organization. But let me illustrate what happens all too frequently. After a 4-day lean engagement with a large state agency, we had 2 beautiful value stream maps displayed on a wall that led us to design 3 change initiatives that would have streamlined their workflow and improved value to their customers. As we were concluding, I watched one of the senior program managers walk up to the director of operations, pick him up by the lapels of his sport coat. He then began to physically shake him and say, if you don't do something with this, don't ever ask me to help you ever again. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of the project. Even though executive leadership believed they respected and valued their employees, nothing in their organizational DNA showed them how to support and listen to them with appropriate action. To be honest, this was not the first time I saw this kind of passion for improving performance, only to see it killed by the neglect of executive leadership. But this event forced me to start asking, how do high-impact organizations approach the practice of leadership? There were 3 attributes I was looking for. First, high levels of employee engagement. Second, the delivery of extraordinary customer value. Third, performing at this high level for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. Employees become cynical about values because they do not see them modeled by their leaders. So when Christy saw her senior leaders listening and taking action based on input from their frontline workers, she saw them behaving consistently with the core value of relationships. Here's another example. In conducting the research for my book, I had the opportunity to interview General Barry McCaffrey, a retired 4-star general. He is the recipient of 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars, and 2 Distinguished Service Crosses. Many have said that when General McCaffrey retired from the Army, he was one of the most highly decorated generals to have ever worn the uniform. After his retirement, he served as a cabinet secretary in the Clinton administration. When I asked him about the Army's approach to leadership, he immediately said, "We practice servant leadership." He then paused and said, "There's another word I would use, and that word is love." Now, internally, I was thinking, wait a minute. The Army trains soldiers to kill the enemy. How is this love? But he went on and spoke openly and candidly about being loved by his commanding officer. During the first Gulf War in the early 1990s, he was the commander of the 24th Infantry Mechanized Division. He commanded the military firepower of 26,000 soldiers, 4,500 vehicles, and 100 combat aircraft. But he said this about his commanding officer, General Norman Schwarzkopf, commander of the United States Central Command, who led all coalition forces in the first Gulf War. His exact words were, he, Schwarzkopf, actually loved me. Frankly, I was stunned. Never once in my MBA program did any professor or book ever reference love as a way of managing people or an organization. So I asked him, how does the Army practically reinforce servant leadership and love into the foundational behaviors of its officers? He quickly gave me 3 examples. First, when in the field, the contents of the latrine go into a 55-gallon barrel. Diesel fuel is added, and the contents are burned. One might think this indelicate task would be the job of the lowest private. Not so. General McCaffrey explained that even the company commander takes a turn stirring the pot because he is first a servant to those they lead. Second, the highest ranking officer goes last when lining up in the cafeteria to get a meal. This has nothing to do with etiquette. Symbolically, it is a statement that says the officer's job is to serve and love their subordinates. Therefore, everyone else gets their meal first. Third, when a helicopter brings soldiers into the battle to engage an enemy force, the highest ranking officer gets off first. While there are logistical reasons for this, there's also a symbolic meaning. When engaging the enemy, the highest ranking officer first puts themselves in harm's way. In the same way, when the helicopter is leaving the battlefield, the highest ranking officer is the last to board, protecting his troops from harm. In the U.S. Army, these behavioral requirements are like keystone habits. There are routines that every leader is expected to model. However, they are not arbitrary. Instead, they are driven by the core value of selfless service, which the Army defines as putting the welfare of the nation, the Army, and your subordinates above your own. So when an officer allows a subordinate to get their food first, or when an officer is the first to engage the enemy in battle, they are putting the welfare of their subordinates above their own welfare. I can only conclude that these behaviors are the highest act of love and servant leadership, and the officer's job is to model them. In doing so, they establish a set of foundational behaviors that build a culture of service and sacrifice. So let me bring this back to Christie's organization. Their core value of relationships drove them to ask every leader and manager to model a foundational behavior of active listening. One of my surprises in researching how high-impact organizations practice leadership was the linkage between core values and foundational behaviors. I would even go so far as to say they put as much emphasis, if not more, on foundational behaviors as core values. So let me leave you with these two behaviors that I found in every organization I profiled. These behaviors helped turn average organizations into high-impact organizations with highly engaged employees who deliver extraordinary value to customers. Leaders and managers got out of their offices, went to their staff, and did a short check-in with each member of their team. For some, this meant once a day. For others, it was once a week. And for others, it was once a month. But in every case, these regular check-ins have become a foundational behavior of their entire leadership. These check-ins were sometimes as simple as, do you have what you need today? Or is there anything I can do to help you today? But the most effective approach I found was a question. What are we asking you to do that adds no value to our customers? When subordinates come up with a problem, before solving their problem, leaders in high-impact organizations resist the urge to solve it. Instead, they are trained to ask, what do you think we should do? This simple question empowers the employee to provide a solution. In addition, the employee is given an active voice in building a high-impact organization. And as a personal benefit, the leader develops a more self-confident employee. For those who want to build a high-impact organization with highly engaged employees who deliver extraordinary customer value, here is my call to action. Take your organizational values, define them by foundational behaviors that every leader must model to build a dynamic culture. You shouldn't have more than 8 or 10 at the most. Then center your leadership development activities around them and watch what happens to your employees.